Fin Gómez joins me here at the desk. Willie James Inman on the North Lawn of the White House. Fin, let me start with you.
Sure.
Do you consider this event of this afternoon, Pope Leo XIV, in any way a political event in America?
I think so, and I think you can characterize it that way. Look, as you stated, we don't know what happens behind closed doors in the conclave, obviously, but if you wanted to contrast the biggest American voice, you can do that. That's emanating from the White House. You can do that with naming the first American pope, right? There have been 266 popes, now 267, and this is the first American pope.
Meaning if it had been someone who was a Francis successor, meaning the same continuity, but from Africa or from South America, it might have played differently and been regarded differently within the confines of the Trump White House.
Exactly. I think the impact is larger on some of the main issues that are emanating from the White House that his predecessor, Pope Francis, also contrasted against: immigration. Big, huge issue. We saw that. We saw that in tweets and posts from Pope Leo XIV when he was a cardinal. You know, that were contrasting against some against
not original ones, but retweets.
Retweets against
yes.
like some of the comments made by JD Vance, and in particular that theological concept that you were talking about, ordo amoris, or order of love. Like essentially, how do you rank your order of love, starting with like those closest to you first, and then externally. And essentially, conceptually, it goes against some of what the St. Augustine order believes in, which is where he comes from. So this contrast, and really in particular to immigration. Therefore, when you have these large contrasting messages, one emanating from the White House on immigration, and then now one from the Vatican, I think it does change the tenor on a global stage.
And both the Vice President and the President, very enthusiastic social media posts, welcoming, celebrating, etc. Yeah. Willie James Inman on the North Lawn of the White House. Today was also a conversation in which the White House could be at least nominally specific about a deal and trade. Let us know what happened.
Yeah, that's right, Major. The United States announcing this deal with the United Kingdom, a trade deal that the president says is comprehensive, essentially removing some of the tariffs in part from those auto tariffs. Of course, the rate set at 25%, giving the Brits a discount, so to speak. Peter Navarro described it that way earlier today, saying that those tariffs will still remain at 10% for those autos exported from the United Kingdom to here in the United States. It'll go up to 25% after 100,000 vehicles. But also on top of that, you have U.S. meat producers able to sell their goods and vice versa for the United Kingdom to do just that here in the United States as well. And ethanol producers will be able to have a better rate in terms of a 0% tariff rate if this deal is finalized. The White House pointed out that is not essentially done just yet. They're still working out the final details, especially those details when it comes to steel and aluminum. Some of those tariffs could be eliminated, or there could be some type of workaround to reduce the tariff load for the United Kingdom, but also still protecting the industry here in the United States. But this is the first major trade deal the president has announced since those reciprocal tariffs and that tariff tit for tat between the United States and China. We, of course, know that those negotiations will start at a high level this weekend in Switzerland between the U.S. and Chinese delegation, when you have the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent traveling to Switzerland, and you also have Jamieson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, traveling there as well to speak with their Chinese counterparts.
And Willie, the White House has described nations with whom we run a trade deficit as being somewhat notorious. We run, if I looked at the last numbers, a $20 billion trade surplus with the United Kingdom, meaning we're on the upside of that. So it doesn't strike me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that this was a really hard thing to work out. Yes, some details, but there are far, far more difficult, more cumbersome negotiations ahead. True?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Remember, the UK is an ally of the United States, and you described it perfectly. This was kind of easy, so to speak. You had the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, visiting the White House several weeks ago and kind of sweetened the pot a little bit with a unprecedented second state visit, announcing that King Charles had invited President Trump to the United Kingdom for that state visit. So perhaps sweetening the pot a little bit, warming the relationship, even when the Prime Minister was on the phone during that Oval Office meeting earlier today. He called the president out by his first name, Donald. And so it was just very interesting to see these two men and these two countries work together in this instance. Of course, British leaders, American leaders have tried for years to come up with some type of trade agreement between the United States and the UK. Remember, the UK has left the European Union. That happened several years ago. So this deal coming to fruition is one that the United Kingdom is celebrating, the U.S. is celebrating, but certainly easier in terms of the logistics when you compare it to a situation between the U.S. and China, for instance.
And Finn, on that point, the White House has felt, I would say, increased pressure to at least put something on the table. They would prefer to put something that is absolutely signed, sealed, and delivered on the table, but they rushed it. I don't want to say rush, but they pushed this one out even before they have everything agreed to, just to say to the markets and to the skeptics, no, we can get some progress.
Proof.
Yeah.
To show the results of what they've been
proof in the figgy pudding, the Brits might say.
Wow, nice reference, Major Garrett. Yes, done. No response.
No response. For the first time in the history of this program, we have silenced Fin Gómez. Willie James Inman, you want to jump in on this at all? You want to go around one more time?
I'll let you guys have the pudding. I'll just stick to talking about the politics here from the North Line. But look, in all seriousness, this is one of those situations that the White House is looking to celebrate. As you were talking about there, this is something that they can point to and say, look, this is what the president is doing. He's coming about with these deals. Peter Navarro, who has been working the airwaves, they were talking with reporters. He essentially said, trust in Trump, almost like God, in God we trust. I mean, they're essentially saying that Trump, at the end of the day, the president will come up with these deals, that the American people can depend on him to announce these landmark agreements between the U.S. and other countries. But with this deal today, the details not finalized. We'll, of course, wait and see what the White House comes up with when they work on those details. But still, nonetheless, something that they can point to as a success.
And very quickly, Willie James, because you mentioned China and the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. On CNBC this afternoon, the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, said the whole goal of those is to de-escalate, to bring down the tariffs, which are essentially creating an embargo between the two countries. So it is now the verbiage of the White House to de-escalate a trade war with China that it initiated. And I think the market's going to look very closely to see how rapidly they move in that direction and what the underlying details of that may be.
Yeah, that's certainly right. They're really being mum around here in terms of what will be worked out, what will be the specifics. Weijia Jiang, our colleague, was in the Oval just hours ago asking the president, is this going to be a substantive conversation? And he essentially said, yes. You know, we're not going to talk about just having another meeting. Remember, as you pointed out perfectly, the U.S. shot the first shot in this trade war with the Chinese. But the White House maintains that we've been treated unfairly for decades. So it's still anyone's guess as to what will happen this weekend. We'll certainly be watching closely. But for Americans, they're in the middle of this, facing those increased prices. Some Chinese retailers and websites have already raised their prices on Americans. Certainly something that we'll continue to watch. But still, nonetheless, that 145% tariff rate is not nothing, right? At the end of the day, consumers could be facing those rising prices, and businesses, small businesses in particular, could be the casualty of this trade war between the U.S. and China.
Willie James Inman shrewdly sidestepping all references to figgy pudding, and Fin Gómez silenced by them for the first time ever on this program. Thanks to you both.